Welcome to another episode of Noise to Music, where we take the noise in our life and turn it into beautiful, wonderful music. I'm your host, Chaim Levy. Today we will be dealing with part 3 of the series dealing with emotional balance. We'll start off by discussing examples of heightened emotions in the Torah. What does emotional mean? How do I know if I'm too emotional? And the balance between intellect and emotions. So first and foremost, let's bring out some ideas of what does the Torah think about heightened emotions or an emotional state. It's brought down in Shir HaShirim that when Hashem wants to explain his feelings towards the Jewish people, he uses a very emotional and graphic depiction of a man that is obsessed with a woman, right? He talks about how much she loves her and how much she's standing outside waiting for her, knocking on her door, and so on and so forth. When he wants to discuss his feelings for the Jewish people, he brings this very highly emotional description, right? We also say in Devarim, love Hashem with all your heart. Have you ever loved someone with all your heart? That is the level that God wants us to reach. So emotions are a very big part of the Torah, of our relationship with God, and so on and so forth. We need to understand, how do I deal? Am I a highly emotional person? In our last classes, we had discussed someone who suppresses himself. Now we're dealing with the other spectrum where there's too much emotion. Now let's think of emotions. When we want to think about emotions, we want to think about them in similar terms of experiencing a physical hunger. It's your body's way of signaling that it needs something. It's, when you have your stomach hurts, it's your body's telling you, hey, I'm hungry, we need to talk. Feelings are like a sign on the map of your internal guidance system. They help you go where you want to go. If a person has fever and he's sweating, it's his body's way of saying, hey, we need to talk. Stomach ache, you ate something, this food doesn't sit well with me. An emotion is the same thing. It's the body's way of saying, hey, we need to talk about something. There's something here either bothering me or too much or too little or something to that extent. That is a highly emotional state. Neuroscience explains that emotions are a complex reaction that the body has to a certain stimulus. So, for example, if you're afraid of something, your heart may begin to race, or your muscles may contract, your skin might turn pale. Those are all the body actually reacting to an emotion. That's why when somebody gets very emotional, or they live in this kind of extreme world of emotion, that can have an effect on their physical body, right? Now, this happens automatically and unconsciously. That's because it's an emotional reaction. Feelings, on the other hand, occur only after your brain becomes aware of the physical changes. At that moment, you consciously experience the feeling of fear. Right? That's kind of what a feeling is. Now, how do I know if I'm too emotional? So we're going to go through 5 signs of a heightened and emotionally intense person. Number 1 is they have emotional depth. I'll just list them and then we'll explain them. Emotional depth. They have. Number 2 is deep empathy. 3, they're highly perceptive. 4, they have a rich inner world with sensual imagery and intellect. Number 5 is creative potential and existential angst. Now let's explain what these are. If you experience emotions to an unusual level of depth, complexity, and intensity, then it makes you kind of feel incredibly alive, or sometimes painfully so, abnormally so. That is an attribute of someone who has a heightened state of emotions. You soar into high bliss and plunge low into gloom in rapid succession. Like it happens back and forth and back and forth. That is an heightened emotional state. When art or music moves you, you're flooded with waves of joy, or you get transcended into like a state of ecstasy through music or art, right? You really feel it very strong. You're passionate, even if you don't show it on the outside, but inside your passion is really racing. A person with a heightened state of emotion, or a highly emotional person, tends to form strong emotional connections with people, places, and things, and sometimes that makes separation difficult, right? Everyone's leaving camp and okay with it. You're still a few months afterwards, still sitting in that nostalgia state. You have that sense of tenderness. Now, for all these 5 things we're going to discuss of how to identify as a highly emotional person, we need to understand. I want to give the kind of define this type of this type of parable. Emotional person versus a highly intellectual person doesn't mean that you don't have, from both, but a highly emotional person. It's basically, if you were to compare the two, someone who is high, does not have a heightened emotional state. It's like Wi-Fi. Your Wi-Fi only picks up, around the block. You only kind of see and feel what's around you and see what's in front of you. Someone who's a highly emotional person, imagine that they have this heightened sense of Wi-Fi where they pick up, for the next city, the next location, which is so far away. You're so sensitive to what's going on outside of your world. That is a heightened emotional state, and just keep plugging that in, because when we just discussed emotional depth, so why does art or music move you so much? You're picking up something that's just way beyond what you see in front of you. Someone who's not necessarily moved by the art piece is because they just kind of see what's in front of them. They don't connect to anything beyond. Someone who has Someone who is a highly emotional person, I think this little poem really depicts how they live their life. To him, a touch is a blow. If you touch them, it's like they got, a blow. A sound is a noise. A misfortune is a tragedy. A joy is an ecstasy. A friend is a lover. A lover is a god. And failure is death. The person who is highly emotional is kind of living in a different world. They're really picking up on a completely different level of Wi-Fi. And it will also lead us to understand why highly emotional people are not understood. Because let's flip it. Let's compare the highly emotional person to someone who's not highly emotional, right? So you're experiencing something as a blow, but the other person is just saying, hey, all I did was touch you. What's the big deal? You're experiencing something as a noise. It's so noisy to them, right? This is just a sound. I had a student I was giving this class, and they say, like, when they go into a place with a lot of lights and colors and brightness and so on and so forth, they really can't handle it, because to them it's a noise, to everyone else it's a sound. You're experiencing something as a tragedy, to someone else it's a misfortune. So, like, it's, what are you getting all riled up about? What's the big deal? You're experiencing something as an ecstasy. You went to a concert. Oh my gosh, that was unbelievable. I can't wait to go again. The person who joined you is just like, yeah, it was nice. I guess it was nice. To you, a friend is a lover. You have a relationship with them. But to the other person, it's just a friend. I don't know what you're getting so upset about. So I didn't call you when I came. And how do you treat a lover? Someone that you love, someone that you're having a relationship with, it's like they're a god. But to the other person, they're not a god. Okay, we love each other. It doesn't mean I have all this allegiance or whatever word you want to use, but it's a completely different level. And to you, a highly emotional person, failure is death. And to them, we failed, we move on. But to the person who's highly emotional, it's a completely different level. It's like death. And that's, how highly emotional people will react to the situation. So that was emotional depth. Two on the list of how to discover if you are an emotionally intense person is deep empathy. The ability to understand and share the feelings of others. You have an innate ability to be affected by other people's energies. You walk into a room, you could sit next to someone and say, I don't know, this person's energy is just affecting me the wrong way. While someone who's not a highly emotionally intense person won't feel anything. What's the big deal? I really don't get. From an early age, you have a grave concern for others, the wider world, and mistreat others. We'll get into that more. But you really feel a deep sense of empathy and connect to other people's energies. In social situations, for example, you can intuitively identify with others' emotions, and you may feel that you absorb their physical and mental ailments to the point where you get overwhelmed. Someone's not feeling well, for some reason, for you, it also has this like impression and effect. It's not just an intellectual part. Now, because of your responsiveness and insight into others' pain, you tend to form soulful and meaningful connections. You're loyal, idealistic, and romantic. Why are you loyal, idealistic, and romantic? Why are people who are highly emotional very loyal? Because you're connecting to another level. Like, you're not just friends. As we said, it is someone it's my lover, it's someone that I'm connected to. I have to be loyal to them. Even you'll go to the same store again and again. You have ideals. Why are you an idealistic person? Because again, your Wi-Fi is going way beyond just what you see in front of you, and you're romantic. You connected to this entire world of romance. Okay. Now, this is all under deep empathy. This will also lead to an increased level of sensual pleasures, such as music, as we mentioned, language, art, as well as an intense reaction to sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. That's why you might get very overwhelmed by these situations. The next one, that was deep empathy, is you're highly perceptive. If you're highly perceptive, and might lead you to believe that you are an emotionally intense person. What does that mean? You perceive things that others miss. You have a sense of knowing when something's about to happen, like, don't go into the dining room, mommy's very upset, or about other people's inner worlds. You can almost feel it. How does that relate? Because the Wi-Fi situation, remember what we said, you can pick it up into a zone that most cannot. All right. You may carry the role of being the problematic one, the scapegoat or the black sheep. Why? Because you're kind of like tapped into another zone of Wi-Fi where no one else can kind of see what you're talking about. You have an innate urge to push the boundaries of conformity, to question or to challenge tradition, particularly those that seem meaningless or unfair. Because you're not just looking at the now, you're looking ahead, you're looking beyond. You're trying to say, why should we conform to these? I don't understand. Where is this taking us? Your Wi-Fi is going much further. Inequality in the world and so on really bothers you. Okay? Now, number 4 is you have a rich inner world with sensual imagery and intellect. Now, we kind of touched upon this, but what this means is that as a child, you might have resorted to an imaginary world. As in times of emotional turmoil, your way to get out of it, you might have had like an emotional friend, or you see kids that are very emotional. They're kind of just living in their own world. They're kind of like they're able to keep themselves occupied and telling themselves stories. They're singing all the time. There's a lot of people in the room for them always, in their little imaginary world. Is because they're tapping into something that's way beyond what they see. Right? They have this heightened sense of imagery. Intellectually, they're inquisitive and reflective. You have a strong need to seek, to understand, to expand your horizon, to gain knowledge, and to analyze your mental content. You always, you like to read. You're an avid reader. You're a keen observer. You might appear critical and impatient with others who can't keep up with you. Why is that? Because of your perception, because of your heightened emotional state, you want to know what's beyond. Okay, you tend to experience zealous enthusiasm about certain topics and endeavors. When you get excited about an idea, your mind runs faster than your words can keep up, or you find yourself talking rapidly, perhaps even interrupting others. Why? Again, because you have this emotionally heightened state, you're an emotional person at a heightened level, your emotions are running way ahead of what you can express. Now, you're highly capable of contemplative thinking and self-reflection, right? The flip side is that you may be occupied with obsessive thoughts and scrupulous self-examination. You may also suffer from perfectionism and self-criticism. You're kind of always, doubting yourself, overthinking, that kind of thing, living in that world. The emotions are taking you to that place that doesn't really exist, and you discover afterwards never really existed, but for you it does. And how misunderstood are you? Because you're bothered by something where no one else can really understand why it is so. That was what we had said was 4, a rich inner world with sensual imagery. Number 5 is creative potential and existential angst. What does that mean? You have a feeling of deep anxiety or dread, typically an unfocused one about the human condition or the state of the world in general. Okay? So you kind of like worried about the day after, or you've always been concerned with the big questions of life. From a young age, you could have experienced like depression about where are we going, where's this world going, like what's it all about, what's the day after, and so on and so forth. The meaningless of life, death, loneliness, these are all things that bothered you at a very young age. That is the reflection of a highly emotional person. They're living in a world that's not just here, but that's way beyond. Okay? For some unnamed reason, you feel the weight of responsibility on your shoulders, even for things you're not responsible for. Highly emotional people will tend to be people that will carry a very heavy load of responsibility. Now, why is this so? Because they're not just feeling what is existing in their world right here and right now, they're feeling the pain of others. They're walking into another world that, is not just right in front of them. That's where the heightened sense of responsibility is from, right? So again, those are kind of 5 signs of how to, kind of identify within yourself. Am I a highly emotional person? Am I experiencing these things? And remember the poem that we read, that someone who's highly emotional, for them it's a blow. For the other person, it's just a touch. For them, it's a noise. For the other one, it's just a sound. For the highly emotional person, it's a tragedy. Their life is, and for the other one, it's a misfortune. A friend is a lover, like we said. For the other person is saying, like, what's the big deal? So we went out to dinner without you. What do you mean? I don't understand. I thought we were lovers. I thought we were connected. And a lover is a God. You're experiencing life through your connection of the highly emotional person, and they're not. And that's why you're misunderstood, and that's why you're constantly getting hurt, because you're living in that world of a heightened emotional state, and the rest of the world is not. Your partner is not, your friends are not, your bosses are not, the places that you go to eat and shop are not. Like, you're being loyal, but you're not getting that loyalty back. Now, the good news is with all this is that with the right information and support, liberation from the pain of being too much is possible. Once you've discovered the origin of your differences, you can begin a journey of retrieving this long lost gift of emotion. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with being a highly emotionally and intense person. It's a beautiful world that you live in. You can start understanding that your whole life history makes sense. You realize that a lot of the shame and depression that they bear come from ill-informed and uninvited commentary about your unique qualities and people's fear of what is unfamiliar. You weren't scared of the unfamiliar. In fact, your heightened level of awareness of subtleties is not only unusual, but also extremely precious, because you live worlds in that beautiful world. You can live your life in that beautiful world. Whereas someone who doesn't understand that you're simply a heightened emotional person, you have heightened levels of intense emotion, can be made to feel blamed, or can be made, feel a sense of shame and depression, low self-esteem, and you have this inability to self-regulate and inner emptiness because you're concerned about a world and you're reacting to a world that doesn't exist, is not really there. You'll kind of get comments like, stop being so emotional, stop overreacting, you're too driven, you're too much, stop being so dramatic, or you worry about everything and you never slow down. A lot of leaders are, in order to have true leadership, you have to be a heightened emotional person to really feel that message beyond. Okay, so the good news is that there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to learn how to regulate yourself. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about briefly. In the next episode, we'll talk about it a little bit more intensely. But the question you need to ask is, you've identified yourself as a highly emotional person. Great. Are you using your emotions to inform you? Because that's how we started. Emotions are supposed to inform us about something, be it positive, be it negative, be it a connection, or are they taking control of you? Now, what's the balance between intellect and emotion? So why didn't God just create robots? Why didn't he just create robots? What does he need this whole emotional side for? The answer is no. God wants that connection through emotion. Emotion is true love. Emotion is the true connection. We weren't just born with intellect. This is the goal, and this is what we want to get to. This is what a highly emotional person wants to get to, is to allow the intellect to lead your emotion. Whoever has compassion, it says in Yalkut Shimoni, whoever has compassion upon the cruel will eventually become cruel to the compassionate. When you have a misguided sense of emotion because you're compassionate to the cruel, meaning like your emotion is taking you to a place that's negative, eventually you're going to flip it, and you're going to end up being cruel to those that are compassionate. So you need to find the balance. You don't want your compassion to take you the wrong way. You don't want your emotions to take you the wrong way. You want to find where is your intellect going to lead your emotion. Rav Kook explains that unbridled emotions, someone who just has a heightened sense of emotions and doesn't know how to regulate them, meaning the emotions that don't receive direction from intellect, will naturally pull you where? Where will heightened emotions pull you? You have this high, bubbling toxic emotions. Where's it going to go? So guess what? It's going to go to the first thing that it could drive, and that is where the physical. It'll take you to the physical drive. So that's where addictions come in. It's going to take you to the quickest thing. It's going to take you to alcohol addiction, drug addiction, depression, sleeping in bed, binging on Netflix. Why? Because you have all these emotions and you don't know what to do with them. So what's the quickest thing you could do? Where is it going to reach? It's going to reach towards materialism and physical drives, the instant pleasure. And that's why it's so dangerous that if the person doesn't know how to identify, regulate, and direct a heightened emotion, if you know that type of person, you could be pulled and drifting, like a leaf in the river. Just wherever the current goes is where it'll take you. It's so important to identify what we're talking about. Those 5 situations that we spoke about, right? The 5 categories. Am I like that? Did any one of those really strike a chord? Okay, so I am a highly emotional person. There's nothing wrong with me. I need to identify it and learn how to regulate it. How do you do that? Just as a quick note, even though in the next episode we'll go into it a little bit more. The goal is to harness the emotions and put them to work. Otherwise, they go their own path. Intellect is basically like a king that directs all of the army. But don't make it too much. Don't make your life just about intellect. Your service of God is not supposed to be just intellectual. Rav Kook brings the pasuk in Kohelet, Al tiyeh tzadik harbeh, meaning like you're suffocating your emotions. You don't want to just be predominantly your intellect. Intellect is supposed to give the directions. If I had to explain it, there's a book. It's called Switch, which I suggest you read. It's like a rider and a horse. Each one has its own strength. Intellect is the rider, but he can only go so far. He can't really lift the bricks. The horse can lift the bricks, but he doesn't know where to go. The intellect is the rider, and the horse is the emotions. Horse without direction is just going to run around. It's not going to get anything done. The intellect without the horse is also not going to get anything done. So who's more important? You can't say who's more important, but the goal is what? Is for the intellect to direct the emotions. The goal is to have a goal, and the rider and the horse work together. Let your emotions and expression flow, but let them be directed towards a goal that fits for you. So, for example, I'm just going to give a small, tiny example. If you're having a state of highly intense emotions that you can't really control, you don't know what to do with them, give them a goal. Talk to them. Give them a box. Give them a structure. Say, okay, this is a painful experience. I'm feeling a lot of heightened rejection, or I'm kind of overreacting right now. I'm going to make it in my mind that I'm only going to think about it Thursday at 9 o'clock. You've now taken the emotions, you haven't suppressed them, you've given them a place to kind of express themselves. But you've also identified that, yes, I am experiencing this right now. That is kind of how we would identify as a highly emotional person, and we also spoke a little bit about how to deal with it. In the next episode, we'll go a little bit more in depth of what to do as a highly emotional person and a suppressed person. Thank you so much for joining us.